Okay, good evening all. I think we might get underway. G'day everyone, and thanks very much for joining us tonight. I think we've got currently about close to 600 coaches on the line, so obviously a great thirst for this, and it's a pretty unique position we find ourselves in as coaches this summer. So thanks very much for tuning in, and hopefully over the next hour, we can learn a bit about what this new environment and new challenge is giving us, and how as coaches we can best overcome that and have a good summer with our cricketers. So my name's Tom Evans. I'm a coaching and talent specialist with Cricket Victoria. We've got Gabriel from Auslan, who's our interpreter, so he'll be signing. So if there is anyone who needs the interpretation, they can pin Gabriel to their screen. That way you'll be able to see him throughout the presentation. So Ben, we might get underway. There's a couple of key websites there that we've dropped in the chat box. So please feel free to visit them throughout. Thanks, Ben. There's those websites there. We'll get underway just with an acknowledgement of country. So Australian Cricket acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians past and present and emerging, and recognise the distinctive rights that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians hold as the original peoples of this land. Thanks, Ben. Just a bit of housekeeping for tonight. Obviously, you'll see the chat boxes there. We've also got the Q&A function. So I'm sure most of us are pretty familiar with Zoom calls after the last sort of 6 months. But if you do have a question, a burning question, you can drop it in the question and answer. If there's something, a good win that you found as a coach that you want to share, you can drop that in the chat. But yeah, I guess stick with the presentation. Hopefully we'll cover as much of, as many of those burning questions as possible. But if you do have a question that, we may have missed, or something that you're not sure of, please feel free to drop it in the question box, and the Cricket Victoria staff member will respond to that. This session is being recorded. So if there's coaches from your club who couldn't get on tonight, we'll record it and we'll place it on the Cricket Victoria website at that link that you can see there, which Paul's already dropped in the chat box. So you can forward that on to anyone who's not able to get here tonight, and hopefully this will be a useful resource for them as well. Throughout, there's a couple of links that we'll go through tonight, which are also helpful for coaches, so they'll get dropped into the chat box. And I've spoken about the Auslan interpretation, so I think we'll get onto the next slide. Thanks, Ben. Just in terms of contacts, if there's any other follow-up that you guys need as coaches, hopefully you're aware of some of these people at Cricket Victoria who are there to support you, as well as obviously your club and association committees. So the coaching and talent team is myself, who looks after sort of the East, North and West Metro. Guy McKenna looks after sort of the South Metro and South Country, and then Shane Coop's basically got the rest of Victoria. So Coopy's got a bit of territory there. So we're working the coaching and talent team. So our area is sort of coach education, as well as the talent pathway. And then if you flick through to the next slide, then our field force contacts or regional contacts, you'll see there, and hopefully those people are familiar to a lot of you, but they're also there to support you. And if you go to the link that I've listed at the top there, which someone will probably drop into that chat box, yeah, those guys are there to support you, and their contact details are at that link. So if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to ping one of the Cricket Victoria staff. Thanks, Ben. So just as a run sheet for tonight, Paul Milo's going to talk about the COVID protocols that coaches need to be aware of. Obviously, it's a pretty new environment. Paul is our head of member services, and he's been sort of the point man working with state government on what those protocols look like for cricket, so that we can hopefully get a cricket season and get back to doing the things that we enjoy. Shane Coop, who's a coaching and talent specialist, as I introduced before. Coopy's going to talk to a couple of the coaches from regional Victoria who have already had training underway so far, just as a bit of a case study and for them to share some of the things that have worked, some of the things that have been a challenge, and what they've done to sort of overcome some of those things. So I think given Country Victoria's been able to train in the small groups for a couple of weeks now, it's best we take some of those learnings from those guys who have been underway. And then further to that, just on the opportunities that these COVID protocols might provide for coaches, I guess it is an opportunity for us to think a little bit differently. We're sort of being forced to. And Tim Buzzard will talk to that. Tim's got a PhD in skill acquisition and has worked across multiple sports, tennis, footy, as well as with Cricket Australia, and was a very handy Premier cricketer with Carlton and Footscray as well. So Buzz will talk a little bit about those opportunities at the end. Thanks, Ben. I'll hand over now to Paul, who's going to run us through the COVID sort of protocols and all the information that, as coaches, I guess we need to be aware of for planning ahead of our session. So thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks everyone for taking the time to dial in tonight. Obviously, it's a credit to you, the wanting to hear about how you can get the game started. I'll do a little bit of the what you can't do, but then as Tom said, the opportunities there to look at things a little bit differently. But I'll give you a little bit of a quick snapshot on the last 8 months, particularly last 2 or 3, and how the season should unfold from here. That website that's on the screen there, a little bit hard to read, but it is in the chat bar there to make sure that you do get to all of the resources are there. About a week ago, we put up around about 40 odd frequently asked questions. We've run around about 14 webinars so far on COVID, so there's probably a few people dialing in tonight that may have been to one of those. Highly likely that your club has been to one of the webinars. The ones that we ran recently had around about 990. And given that we've got just under 1,100 clubs, it's a great turnout. But we've run some for local government, we've run some for umpires and also associations as well. So there'll be a few things to tonight. Tonight will be more about the training, because it is quite generic right across Victoria about what you can and can't do. The match day protocols, whilst they'll be very similar throughout Victoria, it's best to check in with your association just in case there's any tweaks there. We'll touch on a little bit about match day, but it's as much about where you can find the key information, where you can find the key resources, but also a little bit about how training will work as well. But so those webinars that we've had are on that website. You can see there that we've got the FAQs, the webinars, and also the return to cricket packs, which are a link to a Cricket Australia a company that they engaged with, which has a lot of the signage. It has a lot of the sanitizer and wipes, etc. For those coaches that have been asked to be responsible for that, there is guidance in our editable plan, which will come up on the next slide, and there'll be links through the editable plan that we do have that sort of talk about the resources that you will need. So we might get on to the next slide. Thanks, Ben. So this on the website is our editable plan. We had a few versions of this for those that were looking at the website from almost April, May onwards. We had a return to train and play document. That's been superseded by an editable COVID-19 plan. Most of the councils rightly require a COVID plan from every organisation. So we've developed this. It doesn't mean that every club has to use our template. Some associations have developed it. Some individual clubs have developed a plan. But certainly a key for the coaches here is to check in with the club. Do we have a plan? It's best to then have that handy on the night for training, particularly in the first few weeks. We've seen, and for those that are in Melbourne, and we'll touch on this about the protocols under the Step 2 restrictions in Melbourne. All of us living in Melbourne, for those that do, have the fingers crossed that we're going to get some restrictions eased this weekend. It may be a couple of weeks, but under the current protocols, there's no training that can happen in Melbourne. I'll touch on it a little bit more down the track, but the return to train and play guidelines and the training programs that are in that document, and some of the training resources that we've developed are really for that step 3, which is where regional Victoria is. We're really hopeful that that cricket training can resume from this weekend, but we had seen on the weekend, and it's a timely presentation tonight, but we'd seen on the weekend that some of the clubs try to be a little bit clever and organise training and do it in a bit of a covert way, go to different grounds and don't wear your club colours. Not only is it a $5,000 fine from the state government, there's a potential of anywhere from 10 to 100 grand fine for the club. So it's a massive fine and a massive penalty, but it's also holding us back in terms of our relationship with the state government and council to try and get onto the park. We're under the microscope, we're under the spotlight at the moment as probably the major sport that's about to start. And if we don't get it right, we may be further restricted by the state government. So I guess I implore everyone, particularly those from the metro areas, if you were thinking about training tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday, don't do it. It's just going to hold us right back. But I guess with that almost community service announcement, but the return to train and play COVID plan has a range of resources in there. What we're actually suggesting, and it's not an onerous task, but is that all teams have a COVID officer. Now that could be the coach, it could be a captain or a senior player, as well as someone from the club, someone on the committee that takes overall responsibility for it, but they're not going to be at every ground. There is some guidance in the document. There is some basic training that can be done, which is a free half-hour course, and you can get a certificate at the end of that. But it just sort of helps to reinforce the need for every team to have a COVID officer handy on site. So that's probably a takeaway for tonight, is to have a look at this document that's on the website, go and do the online training, start to read through the training guidance that's out there to familiarise yourself with it. But the pleasing thing is most states have similar protocols. Victoria is different to other states, but we've had thousands of clubs returning to training and hundreds throughout Australia returning to matches. So it will take a little bit of extra work, but it's absolutely not impossible. Those that are in regional Victoria would already be training. There's been some games played in regional Victoria as well, and there'll be more this weekend. So those that are in metropolitan areas that I guess are panicking about how it could unfold, we're certainly able to talk you through that tonight to say it's not that difficult, but there will be some things that you just need to think about. So there's the training guide, there's a training session structure about the pre, during and post-training, the key COVID aspects to think about. There's a one-page checklist style. There's also links to developing a QR code for the attendance register as well. But we'll touch on some of those when I come to that slide about what a training night would look like and what are the key differences that you'll see. So we might go to the next slide. Thanks, Ben, one step ahead of me. You can't necessarily, it might be difficult to read on the screen. That's okay. This document, this slide is in the editable plan. I think it's page 4 from memory of the plan. So you can have a look at that at your leisure, but it gives a guidance, and we know, I'm sure a lot of us are listening to the Premier whenever we can. I know that's been a hot topic for Darren Anderson and myself to keep abreast of what's happening at the state government level. The Premier may make some decisions about step 3 this weekend, which may be a positive for Melbourne. It may even adjust it for regional Victoria as well. So the document that's in front of you there was accurate when it was developed. And there is one thing that I'll explain in a couple of slides about a change that's happened in the last 48 hours. So this roadmap will continue to update. It'll be updated either next week or the week after, depending on the amount of changes that are implemented by the state government. But it says there, step 2, really, really clearly, there can be no training take place. And we may be only days away from training that can start. So again, we just urge those that were planning any sort of training to try and say, look, go down in groups of 5 and you'll be right, and go to another ground. Don't do it. What we have is the ability for a household to go down to an oval. A household can use the nets, or it can be up to 5 people from 2 households. So certainly the ability of a couple of players that live within 5 kilometres of a ground, they could go down, have a one-on-one net session, but don't try and, as I said, book out, turn up and have 5 people in each net. It won't be helpful. We're working with the state government. We think we've had some really good success about turf wicket preparation in Melbourne. Obviously, that's already started in region of Victoria. Most councils are on side there, and there is some guidance that's been provided out through to your association, which should have hopefully filtered out to your clubs by now as well, about if you've got any challenges with council. There is some guidance that's been provided out the last 48 hours about the messaging that will require a work permit. So councils that monitor the grounds, they'll be doing that. Excuse me. But where you've got volunteers on behalf of the club, they will need a work permit to work on the practice wickets at the moment. Step 3 protocols is what's happening in regional Victoria. It talks about groups, and this is a key one that we'll touch on in a couple of slides. The document that was put together there was accurate as at last week. In the last couple of days, the group sizes have been increased to what is your normal team size. So if you normally play with 11 on a weekend, you can have a group of 11. If you normally play with 12 or 13, you can have a group of 12 or 13. It was previously limited to 10, which was a state government directive, obviously not a cricket desire, but now that has been increased in the last couple of days to say to be aligned to what the sport actually has on a match day. So that's a good little win to make it easier to train as a team. We appreciate in Melbourne you won't have teams selected, but it might allow a coach to look at who might be regularly in that team, maybe a couple of young players to get some experience, but knowing that your team size is at 11. The key part to remember is that is only step 3. It's not the entirety of the season. If we go to what's listed there as step 4, but often referred to as the state government as the final step. So the one, once regional Victoria, the next step after step 3 would be that final step, where essentially it's groups of 50. So those that are getting more than 50 to training, good luck to you. But essentially that'll be broadly a typical training session. So that's one of the things that as each week and as each month goes by, there's going to be more and more restrictions that get eased, and it'll become easier and easier. So yes, it'll be challenging to start with. It'll be different. Things will start to become a bit of a habit. That's great. And there may be things that can be eased as well. One of the match day examples is the need to have a break every 10 overs to sanitize your hands and to sanitize the ball. That may be extended to 15 or 20 overs as we get through the season. But that's a bit of a work in progress as to what the rules will be there. And we'll touch on some of the others down the track. But we might go to the next one, Ben. So within the editable plan, and again, appreciating you can't read this, but it'll be difficult to read. At the end of the session, go to the website, open up the training plan there, and you'll be able to see some of the protocols. So it talks about before a session, having the signage up, having the sanitizer available for people to have that handy. We've got sort of 10 key tips coming up in a couple of slides, but certainly take a note of this slide. Have a look at the resource when that becomes available, or that is available now once you have a chance to download it. A big thing is attendance register. I'm sure everyone's probably heard about the need for the QR codes and people to check in, the benefits of a contactless system versus manual system. So we've got a guide there for clubs. And again, hopefully this is looked after by the committee of the club, could be the president, the secretary, or who's taken on the responsibility as the COVID officer, and they can direct coaches and provide these QR codes for coaches. But what you just need to do is that all players, doesn't have to be the player, just has to be someone with a mobile phone can scan the QR code before the training, and it takes about 10 to 15 seconds to enter their name and mobile phone number. A parent can do that for a junior. A coach can do that for a player as well if they notice that, that a player hasn't done it, because it's just about checking in on the phone, typing in the details of that person. So that's a critical one. We will talk about some of the tips about organising your groups in advance and some of those other elements there. I give some tips, for example, about making sure that players have that 1.5 metre gap. So that's at the back of a normal training net. Instead of having 6 players bowling at in the one net, spread them out. Maybe have a net as a second net as some throwdowns, and use the first and third net if you can. Because again, to start with, we've only got the smaller groups, so it'll be one team training in a bank of nets, and we'll touch on the distance between those groups as well. I've just seen a bit of a question come through about no sweat and saliva on the ball. That's correct. One of the big things, I guess, as a takeaway for coaches is to get across, particularly senior coaches for juniors, to have a conversation with parents, to have a conversation with players, to say what we see at community level is not going to be the same as what we see at the international level. There's the biosecurity protocols are significant at the elite level, millions of dollars spent there. So the TV is very, very foreign. It's similar that if there was community footy happened, it would look different to what they saw at for those following the AFL through the season. So that's a key message to get across. Last couple of slides for me. We're going to jump on to the next one, Ben. These are again on the CV website. There's an idea there of a plan. Players won't read a 20-page plan, but we've got a 1-page document. We'd encourage our clubs to ask players to complete their name and their date that they're completing the form and return it to the club. Even printing it out and signing it is just as an extra element to the key messages for them to think about. So wearing a face mask to and from training, whilst they're batting, bowling and fielding, they can take it off, but at all other times they need to wear a face mask. Making sure they've checked in, making sure they're using the sanitizer, maintaining their distance, and then obviously it's just encouraging others to follow those protocols if you see some challenging signs. Making sure they don't turn up if they're unwell. If they need to share equipment, clean that with the sanitizer available, and don't put sweat and saliva on the ball. The one across from there is about the group sizes. So you can train as an 11 or a 12 if that's what you normally play with, but you can at the moment only have 2 groups on an oval and 1 group in a net. If you've got a second oval, obviously that can have 2 groups as well. So trying to keep them as separated as you can. So that image there, if you've got nets down the bottom left, have the bottom right almost forward pocket for an AFL ground and the top left forward pocket, so they're really spread out. Groups can rotate on the night. So every half an hour, you'd rotate them in an hour and a half session so everyone gets a net session. But they would stick with their groups. Training balls would stick with their groups as well. So the group up the top left might rotate to the nets. They take all those balls. Once they go from the nets to the bottom right, they take all those balls. The key, and we might actually just go to the next one, Ben, just to keep it sort of flowing through. So the key takeaways for tonight, and I think the key is hearing from a couple of the coaches who are already living and breathing it at the moment, but the key takeaways are not training yet in Melbourne. reading that training plan carefully, being clear on how it will work at your particular session, checking in with the council and the club to make sure that training can start. Taking a break as I'm saying communicate, but have a Zoom session. Get it out in your social media how to work. Put it up on your website. On the first session, do a walkthrough. So this is where group one arrives. They go straight to their group. Here's the actual training drill that you're going to do in this group. When you go across to the bottom of the oval, you're going to do this training session. It's going to be half an hour. Here's where the sanitizer is going to be. This is where the QR code is going to be. Allocate it before the night and give clear instructions to the group. One of the things we've seen without that is groups congregate, they put all their bags together, everyone mingles, particularly in Melbourne, they haven't seen each other, so they're going to use this as a social opportunity. The message is no, it's get in, train, get out. So they've got to go straight to their groups. Have the COVID signage up, the attendance register with it, have the sanitizer breaks when they move between each session, training balls per group. And obviously, as I said, they're the restrictions to start with. They will ease as we get through the season. But that's probably the key things from me, Tom, just to get across. Make sure that you read the documentation, but it's certainly not impossible. Be aware, especially in the early part of the season, that the protocols will be the most stringent, and then it will ease through the year. But I might hand it over now to Koopy, who's going to talk us through a couple of case studies with some coaches that are living and breathing it at the moment.
Thanks, Paul. G'day, everyone. Hope everyone's well. Yeah, as mentioned throughout the webinar so far, this section is we're going to look at some regional case studies. So quite clearly, we have regional clubs that are in a fortunate position to be able to return to train. So we felt it was important to speak to some coaches that are living and breathing it. And the idea behind this section of the webinar is to bring to life the protocols that Paul has just taken us through, but also as well look at some insights from the coaches, some key learnings that they've had so far, and really importantly, what opportunities that they've found from a coach development and player development point of view. So we're going to chat to two coaches. We've got Luke Muller joining us tonight from the Geelong Cricket Club. He's the assistant coach and also the development coach for Geelong. And then we have Daniel McDonald from the Golden Point Cricket Club, who is the senior coach. So Geelong Cricket Club compete in the Victorian Premier Cricket, and Golden Point competing in the Ballarat Cricket Association. We'll start play with you, Luke. Welcome aboard, mate. Thanks for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Koopy. Good to be here, mate, and g'day to everyone out there.
Just the first question, mate. Keen to know, while you are unable to train, how did you keep your playing group engaged during that isolation period?
Yeah, look, we had a bit of a think as coaches. We were really fortunate to get a bit of a start to our training. We had in between, I guess, lockdowns, we had a period where we could actually get a little bit of indoor training going. So we had that really early season, just getting back on ball, just getting back used to it, which was really good. And then all of a sudden things changed again, went back into lockdown. So we were really conscious of not just essentially wasting a month's work, getting the group in small groups, obviously, back together. So we organised some, we called them isolation groups, where we broke them up into groups during that period, where we mixed them up, obviously young players, experienced players, and we just looked at some different activities that they could undertake within their groups, obviously remotely, all of it, but a little bit of it was around wellbeing, where they could sort of bounce ideas off each other, but then we also started to ramp up into some more physical-based activities as well, and even some competition stuff to try and just keep that competitive spirit and element going. And yeah, we really saw the benefit of that. When we did, obviously, we've been fortunate to be back into it now for a couple of weeks, and we're probably seeing the benefit of continuing that contact with each other.
Fantastic, mate. And now you're back training. What's been your approach to ensure that you're adhering to the COVID protocols?
Yeah, I think Paul touched on it pretty clearly there around, we've just got to make sure we're doing the right things. We were, we got underway and we didn't have this training, I guess. So we were really conscious of finding out everything we could. We did have Zoom meetings with the group to talk them through what we did know. And as things changed and we knew a lot more just before we started, we made sure that they were well across all of it. And for us as coaches, we did go through all the training that we needed to, just because, like a lot of us, we had no idea at the start. So we wanted to make sure that we were well and truly across it all. So I think the other key with that being Geelong Cricket Club, and we're located right in smack bang in the middle of Geelong, that, we were pretty aware that, the council was going to be all over us, in one wrong step and they'd probably shut us down. So we were very, very conscious of that. So we wanted to make sure we were ticking off every box that we needed to. Everything in terms of every sanitising product you could think of. And again, located in areas that's easily accessible for the players. All the sign-in, the QR codes, we're really fortunate. Again, our facility in Geelong's a cage, which is brilliant. So we can put those QR codes up so that the players can easily access it on their way into training and obviously on their way out. Again, our cage is set up that we've got 2 exits so that we can have an entrance, I guess, through one way, and then they actually have to exit out the other one. So again, setting up those bag areas for each group was really important and much easier to do that way. Clearly, things like the masks, as coaches, we're all wearing them. The players know that they need to arrive and leave in them, but during the actual training, when they're probably a little bit of huff and puff, they don't need them. So I guess it's, every little box that we are finding out, we want to make sure we're ticking it the whole way through. So probably for us, the absolute number one was we had to educate our players in the importance of all of this too. I think there is that mentality of, oh no, we'll be right. We don't have to do everything. We'll get away with this, we'll get away with that. But again, we knew that it was only going to take one person to make one complaint and everything was going to be shut down. And, again, as Paul said, it would probably put the cricket season back even further than it is. So, again, we just wanted to make sure we were doing everything we needed to and we had to ensure all protocols were met.
And what about your structure of training? How are your groups set up? What does your session plan look like? And in particular too, how it's evolved over time as you've learned?
Yeah, so again, it's evolved a fair bit. We did get a start for a few weeks where we're indoors, and at that stage, the regulations actually allowed for us to have 20 in at one time, and at that stage we had to seek a lot of clarity in this because it seemed not realistic, but under 8 or 18 and under players weren't counted in that. So we were actually able to get some really good sessions going with numbers because, we had quite a few under 18s within our squad, so we could sort of mix that in. So that was quite good. Again, those early sessions where you're just getting back on ball and rolling the arm over to get everything moving again. We got a lot out of those first, I think it was 4 weeks actually we got. And we were even able to do a couple of development specific squads in there as well. So we got a lot out of that first month. Clearly things shut down again. And when we came back, it turned into 10 per group and it didn't matter what age you were. So again, the structures had to change quite a bit there. Again, through all this, we utilised Team App and WhatsApp for all of our communication to players around the groupings, their times, the times that they need to arrive and around. So again, that was really clear to them, how they'd enter and exit the venues. And then, so again, that they're really clear on that. And just again, reiterating all the points around the protocols. So things have changed quite a bit. We did, when we first got outdoors, I think it was we're into our 3rd week of training back into it now. So 3 weeks ago, we did try with having a mix. So we'd have 10 in the cage doing skills, and then we'd have 10 out on a ground being able to do that, and obviously then rotate through the groups to avoid any crossover. But we actually did find that that was even tricky in itself just to navigate that. So we've actually gone back to just 10 at our venue at one time. There's a little break in between each group arriving, giving time for that group to move on. So, and again, I guess from that point of view, it's given us a lot more opportunity to really focus our skills, focus on the specific focus areas for that night, and obviously the skill development that we want. So we've actually even found that, you know, the smaller groups, not trying to get too much, not trying to get too funky with it and too tricky to push the limits, just keeping it simple, and we're actually finding that's working really well. And clearly, again, within the structure, we've just been able to put it back onto our playing group to drive their own development a little bit in terms of things like strength and conditioning and the fielding element, which again, at times we probably think as coaches we need to control everything, but the players are pretty good at knowing what they need. Certainly from our point of view at our club, at the Premier level, they certainly know what they need to get out of it. So allowing the players to drive that side of things a little bit more, and obviously outside of training times to get the most out of it that they can.
Brilliant, mate. You touched on it there slightly, but what have you seen so far in terms of the positives from small group training?
Yeah, again, it's I think just that a few things. I mean, again, we talk about the group lengths, or the group size is 10, and then we're going for around about 40 to 45 minutes per session, which any bowler, you know, that's more than enough, and a batter, that's a pretty good hit out as well. So, you know, we're structuring the group, those 10 in a group, so that we've got 4 batters and 6 bowlers, and it's, you know, they're getting the most out of that 45 minutes. So I guess some of the positives or the things we're working out is that you don't actually need 2.5 hours to train like we normally would, where players are doing their skills. They might have a bat, have a bowl, and a bit of a field, but there's a lot of downtime in there. Rather than now, it's small groups, you know, you set time and we're to the minute, and we're actually finding we're getting the most out of a session because of that. They're there, it's high impact, in and out, you know, short and sharp, and it's far more effective, we're finding. So probably a couple of other positives, you know, over a week we've got 2 sessions, so our multi-skill players that bat and bowl, you know, one night they can spend that 45 minutes batting, and the next night they can spend the 45 minutes having a bowl. So, you know, again, over a week they're getting a really good hit out in everything that they can. So you know, there's some huge positives there. I think, again, you know, positives are, you know, just finding out the player agency, you know, that again, they know exactly what they need and what they need to get out of a session, and we probably don't give them the credit that they deserve sometimes. So when they're pretty smart, they work it out pretty quickly.
Fantastic, Luke. Thanks for your time, mate, and your insights. Really, really appreciate it. We'll move on to Daniel McDonald now from the Golden Point Career Club. Daniel, thanks for jumping on board. Hope you're well, mate.
Thanks, Shane. Likewise.
Keen, firstly, just to kick off with, just before you returned to training, how did you as a coach and the club prepare your players and your captains, your other coaches, and importantly, your parents in readiness for returning to training?
Yeah, as Paul said before, the importance of being able to communicate across multiple platforms was I guess really valuable for us. So having Zoom meetings and emails and our Facebook group as well, so we can provide multiple transparency across all those platforms to all our stakeholders within our club, so that everyone's hearing the same message, we felt was really important. So trying to keep the messages really short as well. No one wants to read big bulk essays as well. So lots of short, sharp and concise information and really to the point has been effective for us. So yeah, I guess we also tried to put that in the form of a video to try and help, again, to reinforce some of the behaviours and just try and hit things in multiple ways. So that was really positive. I guess in saying that, we've got enormous depth and support throughout our committee and throughout the leadership structures in our club as well. So to have the messages reiterated from multiple avenues across both the senior and the junior side of the club, really beneficial as well.
Fantastic, mate. Yeah, and the video was a terrific resource. Chris Harris has put that into the chat channel a few moments ago. So please feel free to click on there and have a look at that great video that Golden Point put together. How many junior teams do you have and senior teams do you have at the club?
Yeah, we're moving up around seven or eight junior teams or junior programs, and then up to 6 senior teams this year as well. So being able to, I guess, be more involved with the senior side of the club has been really positive over the last few years, and see the development of that. I think we're up to having around 90 players be available for selection this weekend, which is really cool. So as a club, we're really proud of all the people that are committed and invested. And obviously it's a bit of a management issue in terms of getting everyone through our facility at once. But yeah, I guess through the support of the council and through timetabling really effectively, we feel we've been able to manage it across a 4-day period.
And as mentioned a few times tonight, the ability to be prepared for your training session is critical, and having your groups ready to go. What's been your approach there? What's your platform and your method with that? Yeah,
we try to be really diligent in getting players into the Facebook group and trying to make that our main point of call. We feel it just can become a little bit messy at times when we're trying to communicate rather across multiple platforms. So trying to direct a lot of the messaging through that Facebook group, and then I guess trying for us as coaches to take a bit of responsibility in knowing who's not in that and then being able to directly contact them. So at the end of the week on a Saturday, we'll post out about lodging their attendance for the training sessions that are occurring for the week ahead on the Tuesday and the Thursday. And then as a coaching group, we'll compile and put together those names and create groups accordingly. We've really tried to keep the groups consistent so that we can ensure that those, for a long period of time now, groups of 10 are quite similar. So the guys are training in that same group as often as possible to minimise unnecessary contact with other members of the club. So yeah, that's been a really effective, I guess, time consuming a little bit, but it's enabled us to control what we can control and ensure that everything runs as smoothly as possible when we turn up.
Fantastic, mate. And so what does the structure look like at your club in terms of your schedule? When do the juniors train? When do the seniors train? And how does that look?
Yeah, so we've got 4 junior sessions that rotate through from just before 4 o'clock to 5:30 Monday to Thursday, and then our senior sessions will follow that on the Tuesday and the Thursday night. We were very fortunate to only have 2 sessions, 2 group sessions kick off before daylight savings. So daylight savings really assisted us in being able to change our time. So we're able to extend senior training from 5:45 to have that 15-minute changeover between the juniors and the seniors out to 7:45. And that's allowed us to pretty much do 2 1-hour split sessions where we can have of late 20 people in both of those. So at times we've pushed over 50 people wanting to attend training, and that's been okay because we've been able to formulate that extra group of 10 and have them out in the oval. So we've got 1 in the nets, 2 out in the oval, and unfortunately that group out in the oval we'll miss a net session on that given night, but we feel like we're still offering plenty of opportunity by accommodating for different kind of tasks and activities out in the oval.
And you've been doing your power of work with the junior section of your club and making sure that junior and senior connection is strong. How have you been working with your junior coaches and making sure that the junior training is aligning to the senior philosophies?
Yeah, we're really proud of the structures that we've been able to put in place as a club over a number of years now, and we'd like to think that a number of our people within our club have been able to have access to representative level coaching courses and representative level cricket. So we feel that there's some really good habits that have been ingrained within our club, and a lot of younger players have been able to take on coaching roles in the junior ranks as well, which has been fantastic. So the messages are becoming very transparent, and then again, there's responsibility as leaders within our senior club to go and make sure that we're communicating as often as possible with our junior counterparts to ensure that, like we said, those messages are being really transparent, and we're seeing similar things produced across. So we'd like to think our junior players are getting similar, I guess, similar conditions to what our senior players are getting, and similar coaching and messages. So, yeah.
Very good, mate. And one final question as we move on. Just keen to know what you're currently viewing as the opportunities and the positives for small group trainings.
Yeah, we've found a number of positives for a number of years now. We've been really trying to push the measure of only having 4 bowlers in the net, and this has reinforced that. So that's been one huge takeaway. And similar to what Luke was saying, the shorter, sharper and intenser sessions are really cool. We've been able to minimise downtime. Players feel like they're quite active for their 60 minutes. And then there's always an opportunity for them to do some additional fielding after, or additional throwdowns out in the oval, whatnot. So, yeah, we've found that a number of these have been really positive, and I think as a club and as a playing group, the initiative and the support that everyone has shown has been unbelievable. There hasn't been any challenges in terms of people going against protocols or guidelines. Everyone's here wanting to play cricket, and they understand the importance of following these things, and they turn up, they look for their sign and look for their name on the whiteboard and where their designated location is after signing in, and off they move. And yeah, we're really proud of those people for doing that.
Fantastic, mate. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you also to Luke as well. Just before I hand back to Tom to keep the show rolling on, I just wanted to make mention, we're well aware that there could have easily been a number of case studies that we could have highlighted tonight. There's lots of great work happening out there within community clubs and coaches. So if there's any pots of gold that you feel are really relevant to everyone online tonight, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A section, just so everyone can be aware of that and we can all learn together. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Kirby, and thanks very much, Luke and Daniel. There's some real gold in there, and yeah, really appreciate you guys jumping on and sharing your insights. I think that'll lead hopefully pretty well into what Tim Buzzard's going to talk about. So we might flip through to the next slide. Thanks, Ben. So both Luke and Daniel, I think, spoke about some of those coaching opportunities that these changes are sort of forcing upon us. Obviously a couple of challenges, but I think within that, it does mean that we need to think differently and do things potentially differently, and that can be a bit of a positive for us as coaches. So I think some of those key themes and some of these things have certainly been touched on by the gents before, but so we're certainly forced to plan thoroughly. I think a big focus on that learning and skill development ahead of sort of just performance and competing. That player leadership responsibility in terms of leading some of those small groups. And I think it's forcing us to get players out of the nets and to potentially play more games because of that rotation through sort of the outfield and only having one group in the nets. So I'll flip over to the next slide and I'll let Buzz sort of go into some of the detail around that from a skill acquisition and player development side of things. Thanks, Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy. And thanks for having me on tonight, and welcome to everyone. So more than happy to take over from where you left off. So as Tommy was saying, there's clearly some significant challenges for us as a coaching community. But I also think that process of trying to overcome some of these challenges can actually be a positive at the end of the road in terms of coming up with new ways of potentially going about our training. So I'm just going to touch on those 4 points that Tommy mentioned then. So starting off with planning, it's been very clear tonight that we're going to have to be well planned as coaches. We're going to have to think clearly about our players, the groups they're going to be in, how those rotations are going to work. We heard tonight a couple of different ways you can adopt those rotations. So that's obviously really important. And then obviously thinking about what happens in those rotations. Okay, so clearly one will be for the nets. You might have another group out there doing fielding. If you happen to have a third group, maybe they'll be doing something else at the other end of the oval. And for me, this is where we've got an opportunity to actually be creative as coaches. And if there's ever a time to, I suppose, be creative with how we go about training, it's probably now, given that players are probably going to be more receptive to, new ideas. And so what I mean by being creative is if we, I suppose just at the moment, I want you to think about what the current club training looks like. okay? What it looks like in your particular environment. And I dare say for all of us, and we've got people here from senior cricket, from junior cricket, I dare say it'll look pretty similar across the board. Okay, it looks pretty similar across Australia. I now want you to think about what a match looks like. Okay, now clearly I think we'll all appreciate that it is impossible to replicate the 6-hour match on a Saturday on a 2-hour training session on a Tuesday. We all accept that. But as a result, there are certain skills in cricket, certain critical skills to play in the game of cricket, which we tend not to train in our typical sessions. So to tell you what I mean, so imagine a batsman. For a batter, one of the central skills, one of the fundamental skills of playing cricket is being able to hit the ball into the gaps. We admire all the good players who can do that. And yet if we think about the way we train, we don't actually practice that skill too much in the nets, because it's quite hard, obviously. You've got bowlers claiming where the fielders are, then you've got the batters claiming different things. That creates a bit of banter. But ultimately, we don't actually practice some of these core skills. So maybe in this COVID training, maybe in this COVID season, it actually represents an opportunity for us to think about how we can actually train some of these skills. So maybe, to give you an example, players go from the nets, they then go onto the outfield to do something. Maybe out there you can come up with a drill or a game where it's about actually practicing hitting the ball into the gaps. It doesn't have to be a 9v2 center wicket like we might imagine. It might simply be 4 players working together, a small group, and they're working on hitting ball to the gaps. That's just one simple example. For bowling, think about one of the key skills for bowling is, you execute 6 deliveries and then you go and have a rest. You go and have a field. Then you come back and execute 6 deliveries, then you go and have a rest. Maybe that's also another opportunity. Maybe when we're out there in the field, some of the bowlers can actually literally practice that, where they might do target bowling, then they'll go do a fielding challenge. Then they'll come back and do target bowling. So these are just a couple of ideas, and there's endless number of ideas. And I suppose what I'm excited for is the creativity, I suppose, amongst us as a coaching group, what we can actually come up with. Okay. Another idea that I was thinking about today was, obviously white ball cricket's going to be important. Maybe there's a way we can actually practice, using the oval space to practice hitting boundaries. Obviously working within the space that we're allowed to. That's obviously most important. But maybe there is a way to try and work on those particular skills. Okay. So that's, I think, one important opportunity that is available to us. The third point here, opportunities to build connection and character. So one thing which we always trying to do as coaches in clubs is trying to help build connection between players. Lots of team building activities and things like that. So maybe there's a way to incorporate that into the rotations when you're in the outfield. One key thing that I did want to emphasize tonight, particularly from a skill development perspective, is us as coaches being really clear on what we're trying to get out of training. Okay, what is the goal of training? And the way I like to talk about it is, are we training for learning or are we training for performance? Okay, so to tell you what I mean, training for learning, think about anything you've had to learn yourself. It could be in cricket, it could be in another sport or something else in life. It was probably challenging, it was hard, it probably looked very messy, there was lots of errors. Probably slow improvements, but you probably found a way to eventually overcome it. Okay, and obviously that's the learning process. So for us as coaches, we need to, I suppose, accept that and accept that mistakes are actually, an important part of coaching, or an important part of the learning process. And sometimes we're going to have drills, or sometimes we're going to have sessions which do look a bit messy, and that's okay. Okay, training for performance. What I mean by this is, the best way I can explain this. Think about a Thursday night before a match where some players just want to feel good for match day. Okay, and they might, do some half volley cover drives, or they might do some target bowling, or whatever it might be. Essentially, training for performance is all about getting yourself ready for Saturday, doing what you need to do to, feel good for the match. Now, I suppose why I'm talking about this is because when we're thinking about our rotations and our particular drills and what we want to try and set up at our training, I think it's really important to be aware of, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And if it is the learning focus, I encourage you to think about those small groups that we've heard a lot about tonight. So getting players to work in pairs. As soon as we do that, all of a sudden players get lots of repetitions, okay, which is obviously critical for learning. If you think about the typical group fielding drill where players might only touch the ball half a dozen times in 5 or 10 minutes, sure, it might be really good for getting around each other and building that team feeling. but it's probably not going to achieve the learning aspect. So I really encourage you to explore those, working in pairs, working in small groups. And if you can do that coupled with, high challenge, then, you're on the right path towards achieving that. Going back to the group fielding activities, there's certainly a time and place for those group type drills. You might think, yep, this is what we need as a team. We need the players to feel good about each other and, get that energy up that we talk about. And so that's perfectly fine if that is the focus. Okay. Oh, sorry, I tried to change slide. Ben, over to you, sorry. The next 2 points, what I suppose the first one, this idea of player leadership and responsibility. So we heard a lot just before about the importance of giving some responsibilities to the players, and certainly, for all clubs, even before COVID, we always rely on players to help drive training. It's a fundamental part of doing well as a club. But I think even more so now, it becomes even more important, particularly for those of you on the line who might be coaching without the luxury of assistant coaches, or you might not have the luxury of parents who can assist. So we really are relying on players to help drive, the drills and the rotations that are, that are being organised. But this also presents an opportunity for leadership. Okay, we might, provide ask one player or a group of players, you're going to look after that particular rotation or that particular drill. Or even just ask players, they can actually come up with what they're going to do out there, which is, an equally effective strategy. Obviously, we want to be a bit careful. We don't just want to lump all the responsibility onto a couple of players, and before we know it, those players are doing the, hitting balls every Tuesday, Thursday, and they're not actually the ones training. So we're doing a bit careful, but I suppose we can be clever with how we do it, and we might, you can rotate that responsibility. You might organise a young player to work with a senior player, and they run one of the drills or run one of the rotations. So we can be clever about how we do this. The final point here is about the space available to us, and in terms of the outfield, the nets, the ratios. So there's obviously going to be more in the outfield than the nets. A really important point that I want to emphasise here is that on the line tonight, some of you will have access to many nets, maybe 2 ovals. Some of you will have access to 1 oval. Some of you might not have access to any ovals. So the really important point is being able to maximise whatever space we have available. Okay, and even more so, maximising that time we have available. So we heard tonight, some ideas of training for an hour, which is fantastic. Obviously, you're in and out, and you're making the most of it. So how can we make the most of that time? And once again, I emphasise that idea of working in small numbers, working in pairs. That way, you're getting more repetitions into that space of time. And the very last thing I just wanted to touch on was modified games, and whether we can be creative in terms of introducing games into our training. So, if you think about other sports like football and basketball, soccer, small-sided games have become very much part of training. It's certainly, and for good reason too. For those sports, it's far easier to adopt those sort of games. And in cricket, it's much harder. But it doesn't mean we can't try and come up with some sort of games for those players out doing, some sort of work in the outfield. As a simple example, maybe going back to that idea before about helping train players or batters hit the ball to the gaps. Maybe there's a way you can turn that drill into a game where it's 4 players competing against each other. Essentially what I encourage you all to give a go in terms of creating games, seeing if it works. And I suppose ultimately, if you're coming up with something which is purposeful and it's a bit of a competition, players will probably be engaged. And I suppose the last thing on that too, all I encourage is that we give it a go. I certainly know what it's like when you come up with a drill or a game and you think it's going to be great, and you have this image in your mind, and then before you know it, it's not that good, and players actually aren't that involved. But that's okay. As coaches, as long as we're learning from this and we're trying to, the next week we either scrap it or we, modify it and try something else. That's all we can do. So I suppose just to finish on, as we said, there's some clear, significant challenges for us this season, but I also try and think about the positive aspect in terms of we're going to have to think a bit differently, and maybe this will actually be beneficial for our training going forward. Tommy, I'm going to finish up there, unless you had anything else you wanted to fire my way.
No, brilliant, Buzz. Thanks very much, mate. That was excellent. And just conscious of the time, so Gabriel, if you need to drop off, thank you very much for your work as well. And if you want to flick through, Ben, I'll just sum up. We've just got a couple of pages of resources for everyone. I think most of these links have been dropped into the chat box, but the main one in terms of the COVID resources are that top one. So the Cricket Victoria website, clubs and support COVID-19, and then all the other links actually sit below that as well. So yeah, if you need those COVID resources, hop on there. There's a lot of the webinars that we've previously done are on there, and that's where this webinar will sit as well within that link onto the website. Thanks, Ben. And then in terms of coaching resources, there's plenty out there to support coaches. Hopefully, a lot of you are aware of some of these resources, but so Cricket Victoria, we have our Coach Force Facebook page. So for any seminars or upcoming sessions, they'll be promoted via that Coach Force Facebook page, and there'll be some additional content on there throughout the summer. So give that a follow if you haven't already, so that you can catch updates there. In terms of the Cricket Australia coaching website, I know that's been dropped in the chat box, but if you go to the community cricket site and coaches, and then courses, and then you launch learning, that'll log you into the learning management system that Cricket Australia have got, and that's where you can do your introduction to coaching, which is the first part of the level 1 coaching course. So there's also, once you've become accredited as a community coach, there's some advanced community modules on there if you're looking for something else as well. So have a look on the website. The junior coaching principles are a great reminder of why we do what we do in terms of coaching, and they're not just probably junior cricket. I think they're really relevant for senior cricket. So I encourage you definitely to have a look at those documents. I've found them a really good reminder of why we do what we do. So yeah, jump on and have a look at those sheets. And then just a reminder around the community coach courses. We've had a couple of questions around those in the chat box, but yeah, essentially due to the restrictions at the moment, we haven't been able to run that face-to-face component of the community coaching course. So we're certainly encouraging any new coaches who need to get accredited to do the introduction to coaching, which is on the website, and then go into the CA Coach app, which is an awesome resource anyway. But at the top of the homepage of the CA Coach app, you'll see the junior coach course. Beautiful, thanks Ben, that's there. And then that junior coach course that's at the top of that left-hand screenshot there of the phone, that's got 10 modules, which is sort of part B of that community coaching course. So there's part A is the intro to coaching online, part B, 10 modules via the app, which are new this season and are really good. So they're a great refresher as well for anyone who's looking for some new coaching content or some coaching tips. Once you've done those two components, we'll then ideally, as soon as we can, in terms of restrictions, we'll then do 2 hours of a face-to-face course. So where it used to be 4 hours, we've now got those 10 modules that sit on the app, and that's reduced the face-to-face time of the community course to 2 hours. So as soon as we're able, we'll run as many of those as we can in a short space of time, to get any coaches that need to get accredited up to speed. But I think that's it from us. Thanks very much to everyone who's been involved tonight. Yeah, really appreciate the input from Luke and Daniel. So thank you to you guys. Thanks to the guys who are answering all the questions online. Hopefully anyone who had a question got that responded to. So appreciate your support with that from the Cricket Victoria staff there. But yeah, big thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight. Hopefully, yes, there'll be some challenges as we've spoken about, but hopefully we can draw out the positives and the opportunities as coaches this summer, get cricket underway and have a great experience for our players. Thanks very much, everyone. All the best. Enjoy.